check. Audio good? All right, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and welcome to TCEQ's HB2771 stakeholder meeting. My name is Robert Sadler. On June 1st, I assumed the role of Deputy Director for the Water Quality Division in TCEQ's Office of Water. For many of you, this will be your first time encountering me. Prior to this position, I spent the last 10 years with the agency in the Office of Compliance and Enforcement as a permit reviewer, compliance investigator, and manager in air emergency response and water programs. I'm excited to join the Water Quality Division, and I look forward to meeting some of you in the future. Today, we have some people from the Office of Water and the Office of Compliance and Enforcement providing updates on oil and gas delegation activities. Chris Landahl from our Industrial Wastewater Permits team will provide an update on the status of the oil and gas general permits. Rebecca Villabo, the team leader of the Stormwater team, will provide an update on the construction general permit. And from the Office of Compliance and Enforcement, we have Macy Beecham and Kendra Houston providing updates on inspections and compliance monitoring, as well as investigation plans. If you have questions at any time during these presentations, please enter them in the chat. Once the presentations have concluded, we'll answer any questions received and then close out the meeting. I would ask all of you to please also verify your attendance using the link that should be in the Q&A window. And with that introduction, a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, I will pass the mic to Chris Landahl. Chris, take it away.
Unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now? Everybody hear me? Good deal. Technology is not my strong suit. So thank you, Robert. What I'm here to do today is to provide an update on the 2 oil and gas general permit packages that TCEQ is developing. Presentations will be in 3 phases. First, I'll start off with recapping what was discussed at our last stakeholder meeting. Then I'll provide an update on progress made since that last stakeholder meeting, and then I'll conclude with outlining the process of these general permits moving forward. So to start off, a recap of what was presented 3 months ago, roughly. Since certain folks probably that might be their first time joining this group. TCEQ is in the process of developing 2 new oil and gas general permits following transfer of permitting authority from the Railroad Commission and EPA to TCEQ. First general permit is assigned general permit number TXG 310000. And that is a TPDES general permit, which is combining EPA's existing two different general permits, NPDES general permit number TXG 330000, which is applicable to onshore stripper wells and coastal facilities, as well as TXG 260000, which is applicable to offshore territorial seas facilities located within 3 miles of the Texas coastline. The second general permit we're working on is assigned general permit number WQG 280000, which is a state-only general permit for the Outer Continental Shelf, which is applicable to facilities between 3 and 10.2 miles from the Texas coastline. Wanted to make sure everybody's aware that separate TCEQ state authorization under the general permit is required in addition to requiring NPDES authority under EPA's existing Outer Continental Shelf General Permit GMG 290000 make it very clear that beyond 10.2 miles, only EPA authorization is required, as Texas does not have authority to regulate discharges beyond 10.2 miles from the coastline. And again, recapping what I presented last time, 3 months ago or so, waste streams that we're proposing to authorize in these two general permits include produced wastewater. A lot of folks probably use the term produced water, but in Texas, we're using the term produced wastewater, well treatment, completion, and workover fluids, deck drainage, sanitary waste, domestic waste, drilling fluids and associated drill cuttings, and drill cuttings associated with non-aqueous drilling fluids. And in each of these categories, certain categories of waste will be prohibited, as outlined in EPA's 40 CFR Part 435 guidelines. Recapping, conclude this little part of it. As presented previously, the TPDES general permit, which is the TXG 310000 general permit, had been drafted and was proceeding through TCEQ management review, and the state-only general permit, the WQG 280000, was under development. So what I'd like to present now is an update on the progress made since our last stakeholder meeting, roughly 3 months ago. So as I mentioned previously, the TPDES general permit was proceeding through TCEQ management. And as that was briefed through multiple levels of TCEQ management up to the Deputy Executive Director, several technical issues were identified that required further evaluation, including revised modeling protocols for produced wastewater discharges. So, as those briefings took place and questions were asked, TCEQ, we took a step back. And we had discussions with numerous entities to gather additional information and make sure we're on the proper path forward. Those discussions included meetings and Microsoft Teams calls, etc., with the US EPA, the Environmental Defense Fund, the Offshore Operators Committee, and the Texas Oil and Gas Association. As I just mentioned, multitude of Microsoft Office team meetings and conference calls have been conducted with these entities to get as much information as we possibly could to make sure we put a product out that's protective of water quality and suitable for use for the regulated discharges. Additionally, we've coordinated with other program areas within the TCEQ. As all that was occurring alongside development of the two general permits, TCEQ, since we've last talked, has received the oil and gas permit application files and other files from both the Railroad Commission and the EPA, and we are continuing to develop and improve our individual permitting program for these new oil and gas discharges, since that's a brand new program that TCEQ is the first time implementing. So since the last stakeholder meeting, significant progress has been made in developing and revising both the draft general permits, the TXG 31 and the WQG 28, as well as the associated fact sheets, which outline the rationale for outlining the terms and conditions that will be eventually proposed in these two general permits. TCEQ is following our well-developed general permitting process and developing these two general permits. And what I would say, this general permit absolutely falls within the category of a complex general permit. So, we're making sure we're doing this thing right. We're ensuring a thorough review is conducted, especially again, since this is a new complex program that TCEQ is regulating for the first time. So since we last talked, numerous environmental impact studies developed by the oil and gas industry have been obtained and reviewed by the TCEQ. Updated analytical data for Texas offshore produced wastewater discharges has been obtained and evaluated by the agency. TCEQ has conducted its own complex core mix modeling for produced wastewater discharges, which EPA did in development of their TXG31 general permit. And based on those core mix modeling results and updated produced wastewater analytical data, a new reasonable potential analysis has been conducted by the TCEQ to determine the need for specific water quality based effluent limitations in both general permits. We're further actively evaluating potential dissolved oxygen impacts from produced wastewater discharges based on recent analytical data that we've obtained. And finally, we're conducting additional technical evaluations associated with the development of both of these general permits. And I will conclude what I've got to say today, and happy to answer questions after everybody gets through, but let you know the process moving forward, and hopefully TCEQ eventually issuing both of these general permits. So following resolution of the limited number of pending technical issues, but I've outlined a few of them, the NPDES general permit will go through review by numerous TCEQ programs that are impacted by the general permit: our Office of Compliance Enforcement, small business, local government assistance, environmental law division, etc. That all of those programs have a piece to play in this kind of thing. After that, the general permit will be briefed once again through TCEQ management chain, and then the general permit will be submitted to US EPA Region 6 for their 90-day review, which is in line with our agreement and our memorandum of agreement with EPA. They have 90 days to review and comment on conditions that TCEQs propose in the general permit. During that 90-day review period, the goal is to complete drafting of the state-only Outer Continental Shelf General Permit WQG28. It is extremely far along in its progress, and there's number of waste streams that are authorized in that location that are not authorized under the NPDES general permit. And so we're working on resolving those technical issues to ensure that general permit's drafted appropriately and protects water quality. And so following, after EPA's 90-day review period, we will resolve any issues that EPA identified during their 90-day review period. And after that, the hope is these two general permits will follow a parallel path forward, which includes the two general permits will once again be briefed up the TCEQ management chain, and will proceed to statewide public notice in both the Texas Register and in certain selected newspapers for a 30-day public comment period. At this stage, we have not selected which newspapers those will be published in, but again, everybody will be able to see the general permits, fact sheets, and provide a 30-day opportunity to provide public comment. Following a review of all the public comments received, response to comments documents will be developed on both of the general permits. And then both general permits will be set on the commission agenda for their consideration for approval and final issuance. So that's what I have for you all this afternoon. Happy to answer questions at the conclusion of the other presentations. Thank you. Potentially, it looks like we might be having some technical difficulties on moving forward to the other presentations.
Rebecca, you're live.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Can you see me and hear me? Okay, great. Thank you for attending our stakeholder meeting. My name is Rebecca Villalba, and as Robert said, I am the team leader for the stormwater team, and we are a new player in this game of oil and gas. You know, our stormwater program is also affected, so I'll give you an update on what we have going on at this time, specifically for the construction stormwater general permit, which is TXR 150000. This is a statewide general permit that regulates stormwater discharges from construction activities that disturb greater than 1 acre of soil. The current permit that we are implementing expires on March 8th of 2023. However, at this point, this permit excludes stormwater runoff from construction activities that are associated with exploration, development, production of oil and gas or geothermal resources, including transportation of crude oil or natural gas by pipeline. So, you know, to address the requirements that we have now based on House Bill 2771 and the recent transfer of state and federal regulatory authority to TCEQ on January 15 of this year for discharges associated with oil and gas exploration, production, processing, treatment operations, or transmission facilities, we started amending the construction general permit. So we started just a couple of months ago in March of this year. We started an amendment without renewal. So I want to make sure that everybody understands we are not renewing the permit right now. We started just the amendment to address the new delegation of this state and federal authority. So we're expanding the applicability for non-exempt oil and gas construction activities to allow entities to apply under our general permit. The amendment expands the applicability of the construction general permit to include, as I said, this non-exempt stormwater discharges into surface water in the state from construction activities. And I will, explain again or list out again these activities that are associated with oil and gas exploration, production, processing, treatment operations, or transmission facilities. The other purpose of also amending this construction general permit is that it's going to replace the currently issued EPA 2017 NPDES construction general permit that they have for us, for Texas, and that number is TXR 10F as in Frank 000. That permit was issued in 2017, but it was modified in June 27 of 2019, and it is set to expire next year on February 16 of 2022. That is why we are moving as fast as we can on amending the construction general permit so that we do have a permit available for entities to apply prior to EPA's permit expiring. Otherwise, they will not have a permit for coverage. I do want everybody to understand that the current amendment is not going to change the expiration date again. It is not a renewal. It is just an amendment. and therefore it will not have any impact on the existing permittees. So you were currently an existing permittee under the construction development permit. You will not need to be required to submit a new application. You are going to continue to operate under the terms and conditions of our current 2018 issued construction development permit. So please make sure that you understand this. This amendment is specifically to bring in approximately 2,000 entities that are regulated right now under EPA's permit. So those entities that are regulated by EPA, if they're going to continue construction activities ongoing past the date of our permit issuance, then they need to obtain authorization under our amended permit, and they will need to submit an application within 90 days of the effective date of our amended construction development permit. So that's what's going on with the construction development permit. So now I'll give you a brief update on where we are. As I said, we started in March and we're trying to move as fast as we can to get a permit. So we drafted a permit. We went up through management to brief, and on April 15, we sent the permit to EPA for review. EPA has 90 days to do their first review. We did ask for an expedited review, and we received a letter from them on May 17. It was not an approval letter. It was an objection letter, an interim objection letter. So we have to go back to the drawing board a little bit and work with EPA and work with our legal staff to revise that permit to address the objections that EPA addressed. To address the objections EPA made. So we sent the revised permit addressing EPA's objections back to them on June 10th. So it was just recently. And now they have 30 days for that re-review. We're hoping that we hear back from them before the 30 days, but because we did work closely with EPA, we hope that we don't have another interim objection, that we actually get an approval letter. And based on that, then we're scheduled to move forward to publication. Based on the current timeline of events, we think we are going to go to publication in the Texas Register and the newspapers. And again, as Chris said, right now we don't have the newspapers lined up yet, but we're going to go to publication hopefully in August. And we are targeting to have this permit amendment issued sometime either late November, early December of this year. So again, our goal is to get this permit issued so that entities that are currently regulated by EPA under EPA's permit, that they have time to apply and get an authorization under our general permit prior to EPA's permit expiring in February of next year. And again, I would like to stress that existing facilities under a current general permit right now do not need to reapply. You wait until our permit gets renewed, which will be in March of 2023. That's when everybody will renew. But for this amendment, existing entities, you continue to do what you're doing. It's going to be for those that currently are with EPA. And like I said, there's about 2,000 of them. So we're expecting a pretty big increase in our universe. That's pretty much what we're doing right now regarding our construction development permit to address the new oil and gas delegation. And I'll answer questions during the time for question and answer. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Good afternoon. My name is Macy Beecham, and I'm the team leader for the compliance monitoring team in the Office of Compliance and Enforcement. My team is responsible for reviewing self-reported data reported on discharge monitoring reports, or DMRs, from TPDES permittees. This includes reviews of timely reporting and limit exceedances. In May, EPA transferred enforcement and compliance data to TCEQ for 31 individually permitted facilities. The list of those facilities should be attached to this meeting's minutes. And we provided instructions on switching program services to email addresses linked to those permits in NetDMR. Since DMRs are required to be reported electronically, all these permittees will need to switch program services to report DMRs for the monitoring period ending June 2021. And A second email reminder was sent to those same email addresses on June 3rd, and then next week we will begin calling those that still have not made the switch to make sure that everyone has the ability to submit their reports timely. For permits that EPA is still holding due to pending or active enforcement cases, they will continue to report DMRs to EPA until we send the notice with instructions to make the necessary updates in net DMR. My team also receives notices of non-compliance. The facilities listed in the attached list of 31 and anyone covered by a general permit should submit those notices to the regional office and mail code 224. There is a form 00501 on the TCEQ website that should be used to capture information in regard to non-compliance events. Whether you are a current oil and gas user and need assistance changing program services, or a new user associated to the new general permits and need assistance signing up, my team can provide assistance at either our net DMR line, which is 512-239-3367, or you can email us at netdmr@tceq.texas.gov. And I will be available for questions, but I will turn it over now to Kendra Houston to discuss investigation plans.
All right. Hello. Am I good? All right. Hi, my name is Kendra Houston, and I am a technical specialist in TCEQ's Program Support and Environmental Assistance Division. I'm speaking on behalf of our region offices on the plans for investigations at these facilities that transferred to TCEQ. So as part of the program oversight, TCEQ will conduct investigations of oil and gas wastewater programs and associated activities. If a facility is authorized under an individual permit or a TCEQ permit, there will be scheduled comprehensive on-site investigations at a prescribed frequency. This will be every 2 years for major sources and every 5 years for minor sources. In addition to these comprehensive scheduled investigations at major and minor sources, the TCEQ may conduct focused investigations, complaint investigations, or other emergency response based on jurisdictional coverage. For FY21, it is anticipated that investigations at these facilities will be primarily complaint-driven, but TCEQ can schedule investigations as well. If an investigator is already at the site, they can add the wastewater investigation component to meet our work plan requirements, and investigations at these facilities are expected to fully begin in FY22. 4 additional regional investigators are being hired to investigate these additional facilities for compliance with federal and state permit requirements, to address violations and follow-up investigations, and to manage response to complaints, emergency response, waste management, and other issues that may arise. As far as complaints against facilities related to these wastewater discharges or unauthorized discharges of wastewater should be reported to TCEQ. All other complaints should be reported to the Railroad Commission. If a complaint is submitted to the wrong agency, it will be referred to the correct agency for agency responsible for investigating. And information on our complaint process can be found on our website. If the complaint is within the TCEQ's jurisdiction, it will be referred to the appropriate regional office. For spills of treated or untreated wastewater that have the potential to reach the waters of the state should be reported to TCEQ. Wastewater includes produced water, hydrostatic test water, and gas effluent. This includes wastewater that's contaminated with crude oil and other hydrocarbons. Spills that are primarily crude oil or other hydrocarbons should continue to be reported to the Railroad Commission. These reporting requirements are in addition to any federal requirements, including required notification to the National Response Center. You can find additional information on our spill reporting on the TCEQ website. So if you have any complaints, if you have any questions on whether a spill or a complaint is within TCEQ's jurisdiction, please reach out to one of our regional offices or our small business and local government assistants, and we can provide additional guidance on that. And we will continue developing our investigation strategies for these facilities. And with that, I will hand it back over. Thank you.
Thank you, Kendra. I am not seeing any questions in the chat. I'm looking to my production crew to confirm that they don't see anything either. No questions. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat pretty quick. Otherwise, we'll assume there are none and make some announcements and close the meeting out. Earlier, we had some issues with the attendance link. Confirmed that it's working now, so if you haven't already, please go and utilize the attendance link. No questions. So before we conclude, I just want to make an announcement. This will be the final standalone HB2771 stakeholder meeting. Future updates on oil and gas wastewater permitting activities, we're going to go ahead and incorporate those into our Water Quality Advisory Work Group, or WQ-AWG meetings. The next WQ-AWG meeting is scheduled July 20th at 1:30 p.m. It'll also be a Teams live event. If you've already subscribed to the HB2771 email group, then you should already be receiving information about Water Quality Advisory Work Group meetings. If you're not sure if you're on the Water Quality Advisory Work Group email list and you want to ensure that you do receive information about future meetings, please email outreach@tceq.texas.gov and include the acronym WQAWG in the subject line of the email with your request to be added. I do see a question now. Question is for Macy regarding new NetDMR instance. It says facility has received instructions to switch to TCEQ instance. If facility is ready to terminate NPDES permit, now TCEQ permit, should facility terminate before or after submitting DMRs for the June 30th monitoring period?
If you've gone ahead and switched your program services, you could report using to the TCEQ using the new service and then terminate the permit, if that is the question. But I don't think it really matters. If you terminate, you would still be able to go into NetDMR and submit your DMRs if you have them.
Thank you, Macy. Any other questions? I'm not seeing anything. If you do have questions, you can still email hb2771@tceq.texas.gov and we can answer them that way. Again, just to reiterate, this is our final standalone HB2771 stakeholder meeting, and we will roll future updates into Water Quality Advisory Work Group meetings. So please email outreach@tceq.texas.gov and use that acronym WQAWG if you're interested. And I do see another question. What is the process for an individual NPDES permit for oil and gas companies? Chris Lindahl, I'm going to assume that you are the person to answer that one. And you're muted right now, Chris.
Can you hear me? Not exactly sure how to respond to the question, but from what I gathered from it, an entity is not seeking authorization to discharge under the two general permits I discussed previously. They may be Ag and Wildlife Exemption facilities located west of the 98th meridian. Not exactly sure, but the individual permit process, TCEQ has modified its permit applications. They're available on the TCEQ website. You fill out and complete the individual permit form, and it goes through again an individual it goes through an individual technical review, which is different than what we're on how we regulate general entities authorized under general permit, to where those conditions are stipulated and entities seek coverage under those. So the application will undergo an individual technical review, goes through 2 rounds of public notice, and an individual permit is authorized to that entity. And I'd be happy to explain further if there's a follow-up question, but that's kind of the general or the overall process for an individual permit.
Thank you, Chris. This is the final call for questions. Going once. Going twice. As I said, if you do have questions after the meeting, you can email hb2771@tceq.texas.gov. And so I'll make a final reminder to please verify your attendance using the link in the QA window before you log off. It should be working now. And if there are no more questions, and I'm not seeing any, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting. I'd like to thank Water Quality Division and OC staff. Oh, no, there's a question. If you do have questions, y'all, please put them in the chat now. There's no need to wait for the requests for questions. They load up and I can read them in the order that we receive them. So if you do have questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat now, just to help facilitate this meeting, the end part of this meeting. This question is for Rebecca. Rebecca, could you go into the specific oil and gas facilities that will be added to the amended CGP?
Hello, okay. So the specific ones are the ones that are non-exempt. You know, EPA has a great website that lists the exempt facilities, but the ones that are non-exempt are the ones that were going to be added to the construction general permit related to oil and gas activities. And so, for example, you know, related to the exploration, production, processing, transmission, and treatment operations, if they're exempt, then this permit's not going to regulate them to specifically say they're exempt. But facilities that operate such as the liquefied natural gas or LNG regasification and ethanol plants, for example, are some that are not exempt and will be required to obtain a permit. So, you know, the list is pretty long. So if you send an email, you know, to me or to House Bill 2771 email, I can go ahead and elaborate. Because otherwise, you know, the list is pretty lengthy. But for now, in general, it's just if you are not listed in those exemptions that EPA has, which is also a very long exemption, then we would not be regulating you. But if you are doing non-exempt discharges from construction related to oil and gas discharges, then we would be including you in the permit. And the fact sheet of the permit is going to have that information that hopefully is going to be clear for everybody. And our website will also have that information, because we are getting questions right now that is kind of difficult for some people to understand what's exempt and what's not, because there's a line that is a little bit gray in some areas. For example, related to roads. If you are building the road, constructing it during, you know, at the field, on the site, it's exempt. But if later on you are going to do improvements to that road, you're going to change that road, then you're not exempt. And that's going to be something that you need to then get coverage under a construction zone permit. So that's the basic example of some of the questions that we're getting, and where you have to really know what's going on. So the best advice is send us an email, ask us a question, because some of those nuances are very unique. When we've met with EPA to discuss, you know, some of these, they say that sometimes when they get a question, they even have to really research and go to headquarters to see if it applies or not, because there's nuances that are not loud and clear in the rules or in the Energy Policy Act.
Thank you, Rebecca. Chris, I believe these next two questions are for you. Number one is, will this process regulate saltwater disposal wells? And number two, along the lines of a prior question, can an oil and gas operator seek coverage under an individual permit if it's not under the Ag and Wildlife Exemption? And Chris, you're on mute again.
Yeah, just trying to write those down. So I heard something about saltwater disposal wells, and Robert, what was the second question?
Second question was, can an oil and gas operator seek coverage under an individual permit if not under the Ag and Wildlife Exemption?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and answer the second question first. I mean, absolutely. Any entity can always avail themselves to obtaining an individual permit if they either cannot qualify under the general permit, under a general permit, or cannot meet the conditions outlined in the general permit. So, absolutely any entity, whether we propose or the entity could qualify under the terms and conditions of either or the two general permits we spoke to before, absolutely can always apply for an individual permit. Certainly a more lengthy process, but absolutely an entity can do so. Saltwater disposal wells are not covered under either of these two general permits. These two general permits are specifically associated with oil and gas extraction activities. So saltwater disposal wells, frankly, they're not what TCEQ obtained authorization to cover is discharges into surface water in the state under the NPDES, which of course Texas has authority under TPDES program. So saltwater disposal wells would be associated with a different program within TCEQ, I'm presuming under the Office of Waste, under the Underground Injection Control Program. So I would suggest you contact those folks if you got further questions related to saltwater disposal wells. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Chris. I'm not seeing any other questions. I will give it 30 seconds. Again, you can always email questions to HB2771 tceq.texas.gov. Email outreach at tceq.texas.gov if you'd like to be included on the Water Quality Advisory Work Group meeting information mailouts. And I'm not seeing any more questions. So we'll go ahead and close out the meeting. I'd just like to thank Water Quality Division and Office of Compliance and Enforcement staff for their presentations, and thank all of you for your time today. Have a good one.